So hello everybody, my name's Matt Riemer, and I'm a full-time Ruby on Rails developer and an open sourcerer. Try not to take myself too seriously because I have a very frustrating, very hard job, and if I did take myself seriously, I don't even know what would happen. But thank you for Alan for making this meetup happen. Thank you for everybody coming out here. It's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces here. So I am a lifelong coder. I've been coding my whole life since I was maybe about 8 or 9. I cut my teeth on some QBasic. But I had to actually look this up, and my first lines of code on a commercial piece of software were actually in 1999, when I was 16 years old, as a summer student. And I've been coding professionally basically ever since, and I've been working with Ruby on Rails for about 9 years now. So in my day job, I am the co-founder and CTO of Code in Effect, the most effective web consultancy here in Edmonton. This is where I write most of my code. My office, my chair is kind of over here kind of thing. This is our nice couches and all that good stuff. So I don't know, over the last 10 years or so, through Code in Effect, we've built literally, dozens of client apps. Most of these apps are database driven. They are CRUD apps, create, read, update, destroy. And that's exactly the kind of sites that play to Rails' strengths and kind of the sites that I like building. So when I say building effective websites, that's been shortened to sites now. I basically mean building websites the Code in Effect way, with our opinions and software stack and all that kind of good stuff. So one of our missions at Code in Effect is to contribute back to our community. We do this in a lot of ways, and open source is one of those big ways. So all the code you see here today is 100% open source. Everything you see me run through here, and there's going to be a lot of it, is all on GitHub. We're going to be jumping into this kind of effective website, which is my starter Rails app that kind of shows off all the other gems. But all these other effective gems are kind of the Code in Effect secret sauce. So they make building CRUD apps really fast and really easy. So we have about 30, it's going to take actually about 35 minutes to get through the following 3 goals. I want to do a tour of my starter Rails website and introduce you to some of these effective gems. I want to do a deep dive into code and just kind of go through my process of evaluating a new Rails website that I've only seen for the first time. And then I want to show off my personal process behind building Rails websites. So we're going to build out a non-trivial, like actually good feature today. And of course, to entertain and delight your senses, I'm also going to provide 10 time-saving tips that have nothing to do with the effective gems, just general Rails tips. And there's going to be a few skill testing questions throughout, so look sharp. So my stack, just kind of starting about how I build websites here. I'm kind of an old school developer. I just basically use Sublime Text. That's what I'm in here now. I use a little bit of Source Tree, if you've ever run into this one before. This is one of those Bitbucket products for doing some Git stuff. But mostly I do just command line Git. And I am a Firefox user. I know everyone here statistically is on Chrome. There might be like one non-one, but Firefox for life, it's where it's at. Great, okay, so the way I approach building a brand new Rails website is to start with an existing Rails website. To just go Rails new and get all your gems set up, have devise in place, get your user models and all that kind of stuff, probably takes on the order of like maybe 8 to 10 hours for like someone that knows what they're doing, maybe longer as a beginner. It does take a long time. So I did want to do like a Rails new and kind of like build up a Rails website with you guys, but that's not going to happen. We can't do that in half an hour here. So that is basically my time saver number one tip is maintain your own starter website. Update it every time you start a new project, but keep all the code you've got in there and go forward with it. Don't keep reinventing the same kind of thing. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna. This is the effective website. It is a starter Rails website, Rails 5.2. There's a live demo if you ever wanted to check it out. But basically, I've already just done this getting started stuff. There's about 5 or 6 commands here to just kind of check it out. Migrate and seed your database, then runs the server. So that's what I've done now. I have a effective website running, bundle exec Rails server. And we will check out some of the code here. So the very first file I look at when evaluating a new Rails website for the first time, it is the gem file. I want to see what kind of software libraries I'm working with. I want to know the scope of this app. So we got Rails, we got Bootstrap, which makes it a little bit quicker to boot up. We've got Postgres. We've got about 12 of these standard gems here, and then all of the effective gems down here. So ignore the effective stuff for now. This is pop quiz number 1. I was hoping someone from the audience could give me just a 1-sentence quick description of each of these 12 gems here. Anyone up for it?
Each of them?
Sure.
Okay.
Just super quickly, please.
Okay, devise is an authentication gem.
Yep.
And then can I believe is authorization.
Yep.
Bootstrap is usually is made to make styling easy.
Twitter Bootstrap 4, yep.
ASWK, that's where you store your basically store your code.
So we do direct to S3 uploads for big files
yeah,
and.
That's where you upload. TurboLinks is one of the default gems that is the moment you press Rails new.
TurboLinks is like a small wrapper around the web cycle. So instead of refreshing the entire page, TurboLinks is like a little JavaScript thing that basically refreshes the whole page, looks at the response, finds the body and the end body tag, and then just puts that into your HTML and doesn't do anything else. So it has the perceived performance of being a full screen app, and it just feels like maybe 500 milliseconds faster. It's pretty sweet.
I at least got half of them.
You did great. Thank you so much. The only other one I want to point out that you might not be aware of is Cocoon for doing like has many forms and stuff. But all these gems I would basically expect any Rails developer to be at least aware of. So that's cool. So that's gem file. Assets, the JavaScript, we got nothing in these. I keep an admin and a just front-facing website. So there's going to be, you can log into this website, and then you can also go to the admin section. So that's what's up here. But the application.js, I just run jQuery, Bootstrap. This popper thing's just a dependency for Bootstrap. Active storage, again, for doing those direct to S3 uploads. TurboLinks is great. Then just jQuery and a little bit of effective stuff. So I just want to show you, there's not really any JavaScript going on this site at all, outside of the gems. Same thing for the style sheets. There's basically nothing going on here. So we just bring in a standard Bootstrap 4. I'm going to skip over the controllers and data tables for a moment. Just a little user tag helper there. Active job. It's a mailer. But let's jump into the model here. So the standard user.rb is always kind of a big file. You kind of always have way too much stuff in there. They call it a God object because it kind of controls everything, but I try to keep it simple. So my user object, I do run devise, for better or worse. Devise is pretty sweet. This user does have a billing and a shipping address. Instead of destroying it, we do the archive patterns. You set a Boolean archive true, and then you don't display archived ones. It's kind of a soft delete thing. We have this axis role restricted, which basically gives this user roles. So in my apps, user can either be an admin, a staff, or a client. And this is all done through effective roles. So effective roles is a very simple gem that basically does the bitmask pattern. Unless you just do like this stuff, you can say post.roles save it, and then you can say, is this dude an admin, or any of these other roles. Pretty straightforward there. This effective resources do block lists out all the attributes on the model. I have a pet peeve where I hate switching to that schema.sql to look at the attributes on my table, then switching back. So this does a little bit of fancy stuff, which we'll get into in a moment, but basically it's just listing out the attributes. And then nothing else fancy here. I just got some scopes, some validations, and a little bit of devise stuff here. So that's the user. And then a client is the way I group my users. So every user can belong to multiple clients through a mate join object. So a client here could just be like a group. It could be a team or an organization. It's just kind of one group of users. But basically all it's got is a name and a phone number, email on there. And then this is my little join object. So you can belong to, or a user has many clients through mate, and then the mate itself has roles. So you can belong to a client as the owner of it, a member, or a collaborator. And this kind of gives you basically any permissions and grouping and all that kind of stuff you need. So last thing we're going to hop into is the views here. It's my layout. So right away you're going to notice that this is in Haml. So Haml is a step up from HTML, and it's a huge time saver. I really like Haml. Everything's white space sensitive. So if you have like a body tag, when the block ends, it'll automatically close it for you. But just to show what's up here, when you do a hash or a dot, that means the ID or a class. So what this is basically saying is a div ID content wrap, and this container is just that kind of thing. And then with Haml, you can do a table tag with a dot table class, which is a Bootstrap thing. And you could do a h3 dot something, which would make an h3 tag with the something class. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So that's my time saver tip number 2, is basically maintain a really good layout. Your layout file is the first thing that your controller renders. It should have one of these yield blocks in it, and you should really strive to set up your layout so that that yield is in the exact perfect place you need it, so that your index or your show.html just automatically drops the content in there and puts it on the page where you want it to be. A good layout seems simple, but I've probably spent at least a few days just building this like 30 lines of code. So that's time saver number 2, a good layout. All my nav bars are extracted into a partial. I like to check every single action before I display it on a menu. So the nav bars there. And that's about it. I want to hop into the app here now. Oh, right. So on my admin client's endpoint, this is the form that ends up being rendered. You'll notice they have all these like tabs and tab kind of helpers. All these helpers come from the effective Bootstrap gem. So this is one of the gems I built to basically provide anything you need for working with Twitter Bootstrap 4. So we install the Bootstrap gem, we put in the JavaScript and CSS, and then we put on this gem, and it gives us everything we need. So there's view helpers, all the collapse, drop down, list group, nav bars. This tabs helper is super helpful, because if you look at the actual Bootstrap HTML, it's very verbose and it's easy to get wrong. Effective Bootstrap also does icons. With Bootstrap 3, they used to have these glyph icons built in, but they dropped support for it. So in Twitter Bootstrap 4, they're kind of like, go find your own icons. So we went and we built out an icon stuff with feather icons and font awesome. And you just kind of have these. It's all SVG driven. It's actually really cool. There's a lot of front-end stuff behind that that I don't like to get into. And then the effective Bootstrap gem as well, I have my own form builder. So the Rails 5, they introduced this form with model syntax. That's the new way to do forms. And around that time, there was just no way to make HTML perfect Bootstrap 4 forms. So we went and we wrote that code. It produces exactly the inputs and labels, the divs as per the Bootstrap examples. And then with these ones, there's a whole bunch of extra JavaScript and cool little extras on top of it. We have styled select boxes and date pickers and all that kind of good stuff. So this is my entire directory, views, admin, clients, just these two little partials in here. And that's my pop quiz number 2. What files would you normally expect to see in here that you're not seeing? They would end in .html? Sure. So normally in a directory here, you would see your index.html, your edit, your new, and your show, I guess. But that's not the way I like to do my Rails websites. So Rails has a really cool thing built in called view paths and application templates. What this basically means is when we render an action, we're going to render the admin client's index, let's say. It's going to go and it's going to search for admin client's index.html.haml. But if that file is not there, Rails will actually go into this application directory and render this index.html.haml. So this is called an application template, something handled by Rails. And it's a way of just kind of like falling back to a default index or a show page. You can use it for a lot of things. What I've used it for is lots of metacode. I meted it up like crazy. So each of my action HTMLs here only need to be written once, and they will work for any resource at all. Very cool. So that's my time saver number 3. Use some application templates. Okay, so we've seen a quick tour of the app here. We got about half of it through. We're gonna jump into the actual website. So this is the effective website. I just pulled it down from GitHub with no other customizations this morning. And this is actually what I start with to build a new client project or any kind of Rails project. This is my base app. So you can see I'm definitely not a great designer or anything. It's not the prettiest in the world. But it is just a default Twitter Bootstrap, unstyled website kind of thing. So I do have a blog area, category posts, all that kind of good stuff, which is handled by the effective posts gem. So this gem will do like the entire blog process, does user submissions and admin approvals. There's all these like mailers to see when you've been approved and all that kind of good stuff. Just category roots or otherwise. It's pretty sweet. We have just a bunch of like content pages here. These are editable by an admin, which will show off in a little bit. Well, that's driven by my effective pages gem. So this is basically a full content management system. You can create pages once it's installed and use a full screen. What you see is what you get editor to edit the content. File uploads, there's a whole idea of different templates, so you can quickly make 1 and 2 column views, that kind of stuff. Just slugifying the pages. All the SEO side of things, there's like all these like meta tags and Twitter cards and original gangster meta tags for Facebook that this handles with. Just drops all those, like, it's just like 30 tags in. That's pretty sweet. So that's my CMS. And then this is another good one, the effective style guide. Very long page load here. What this gem does, all it does is provide the HTML page for each Bootstrap component. So I went and I copied and pasted just the HTML off of the Bootstrap for example page. So you have every single component under the sun here. With the idea that a designer stepping in, they want to apply their Bootstrap theme or updates, well, they should be able to apply their theme and just look at this page and see how everything is going to look. This also shows off all my icons or whatever. Google got special color, and I like this spinner one here. I think that's a good spinner. Cool, okay. So yeah, we drop this into our each app and just let people style stuff or whatever. So I'll give you a quick rip through the admin section here. When I am in development mode, any user will work with any password. This is my time saver tip number 4. Super handy devise hack. All you got to do is add basically this one-liner here, valid password, and I just hard code that valid password to say if I'm in development, it's valid. So I can go and I can log in as my admin user with any password here. It just works. Huge time saver. So we are in the /admin section now. So the way I have it set up is any admin or staff user can get into the admin section. And then if you're a client user, you're not allowed in here. But this is my standard kind of admin interface. Everything I build is very CRUD driven, it's very table driven. So all these tables are super nice. They sort and stuff. You can do pagination on the bottom here. These are scopes on the top. And all this is driven from effective data tables. So effective data tables is probably my second biggest gem. This works with the existing jQuery data tables library, but then I built like the entire Rails side of it out. There's a live demo for this. But long story short is it takes this entire table that you're seeing here with all these actions, sorting, searching, scopes, there's filters and charts in there, and it just boils it down to this one data file. So you basically build a post data table, and then you just initialize it in a controller, render it in a view, and it does all this advanced table stuff for you. Sure does. You can copy to the clipboard. You can do a full CSV export. You can do automatic printing. That's actually good. There's show hide. I don't have it set up here, but there's also bulk actions and a whole bunch. So I'll show you the data table for that now. So this is a data table file. This is only the code this is all the code that I wrote for that client's index page. Filters at the top here, these match scopes on the user. And then data table, I got just some columns. This client's one is a little bit of an involved column because I wanted to put on these little member owner badges. And then you just define a collection, which is a standard active record scope, or you can actually just do an array of arrays and it'll work with building reports and stuff. Data tables is awesome. Clients. Show off a form here, I guess. These billing and address fields come from effective addresses, which doesn't do too much, but it does give you these kind of AJAX province or state endpoints. And if you're in, how do you pronounce that, hey? I don't know. And if you're in Canada, Chile, or the United States, it'll actually do validations around the postal codes and stuff as well, because those are countries that I've interacted with. So remember, each client has multiple users in it. So this client has an owner, a member, and a collaborator. If we wanted to add another person onto it, we could either select one from the list here, or flip this around and do someone new and add them. Maybe it's just a member, I guess. So I use the devise invitable gem. Now that I just created this mate, this guy, it actually sends off an email. So it says, hey, someone new, you've been invited. Click this link and you can come and sign up, kind of thing. Super handy. So So I do have a full effective orders. This gem is the entire payments, cart, checkout process, anything involved with money. It is a huge one. It'll automatically, or I should say it has built-in support for PayPal, Moneris, and Stripe. And we actually run it to do all our Stripe subscriptions and per-user billing on Tudum, our SaaS app. It's pretty sweet, but just here very quickly, you can just kind of say, here, buy a t-shirt, send an email request, and then they can come in and purchase that. Or you can hook it up and make like an actual object. You could make an event ticket or a product model, and this allows you to put it in the cart and check out and do that whole stuff. It's pretty sweet. As far as I want to go though. So effective pages, this is the admin for some of those content pages we saw on the front. So we had an about and a contact. There was actually a members only page that you weren't even aware of. But I'll hop into the contact here. The template, slug, meta descriptions. You can make it role specific. But we'll jump into the front end here. So when I edit a page or a post, I like to use this full screen, what you see is what you get editor. Pretty sweet, built off of CK editor. And I know there's a whole bunch of like Rails 6 stuff with all this tricks, and they're going to start doing their own rich text editors right in the Rails framework, which is pretty sweet, but replaces a lot of the work I've done in the last few years. This is all done through active storage with a direct to S3 I just uploaded. And you can also do, oops. You can also do, there's a little snippet system, so you can say, I want to put in the current user info, their email, and drag these guys around or whatever. Cool. Save. Similar thing with my posts. All my posts can be edited in the full screen editor as well. And the last thing I wanted to show is just the log screen. So this is effective logging. Super handy gem, just automatically intercepts any emails sent by your application and logs them. So without thinking, just every email I have logged. You can also do this one-liner logged changes. What log changes will do is just logs any changes to the record. So we're going to just hop in and I'll demonstrate this quickly. So just change his name here. And then hopefully this will show up in here. Sure enough, the name was changed from Dennis Schiller to Dennis Schillerit, and gives you the attributes at the time and looks into all the has-manys and belongs to very quickly. Logging's fun. Just a Postgres table, just a logs table. And I know that's maybe not ideal, but I've never really had problems with it before. As long as you keep it to that one table, sometimes it can get really big, but then you just go and take like the last 5 years and put them on some other archive table or whatever. Yes, there, that's exactly right. And then the only other thing I wanted to show off is the impersonate user functionality. So as an admin on the site, I can go to any user and I can impersonate them. And it basically just logs me in as that user. So I was an admin, I'm now logged in as Joseph Hop and seeing what he would see on the front end. That's my time-saving tip number 5. Figure out impersonating users, and your clients will love you for that. We've saved hundreds of hours and not supported our clients because they can just go in and fix their problems themselves now. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm going to hop back to the code here and show you how this all works. So pop quiz number 3. When we receive a web request, what is the very first file that we control, the very first file that Rails runs? What's like the point of entry, the first thing it's going to run on a Rails request? That we control, so no middleware, no rack or whatever. Once it hits one of the files on my hard drive that I have in this editor here, yeah, sure. So it's the routes.rb. The very first file that you control, that your app hits, is the routes. You make a web request, rack goes and it says, based on this request and this parameters, run through my routes file, and if any of those match the format, that's where we're going to send this route to. So for me, routes.rb is like probably actually the #1 most important file in your whole app. This tells, I guess, the internet or your web app or whatever, just like how you're going to respond to things, which actions, what you can do on each resource. So I have a devise set up. I have that impersonate route we were just talking about. There's some sidekick stuff for running in production there. These are super handy, these test endpoints. So on any of my apps, if I just go and type in test exception, this is going to raise an intentional exception. This is the code for it here, with the idea that this tests my exception notifier gem. This will send me an email, and it gets to my inbox with a stack trace. So this basically just lets me know that my error handling process is working, is actually good on the internet. And then I also have another one, test/email, which will send me an email with an exception in it, but it runs on a background job in like active job land. So it's like this different kind of error flows, but you should definitely make sure you're getting error messages from your background jobs. So that's time saver number 6. Have a secret endpoint where you can test your application. Cool. Yes, my robots file is blocking it, but I've never had an issue with it. Security through obscurity, my friend. Okay, so other than that's going on, it's basically just straightforward. We have resources clients. This is my next pop quiz. When I type the word resources, this is going to add some actions for the clients. Can anyone tell me what 7 actions this is adding?
Index, new, create, edit, update, delete.
Sure, you got it, that's right. For bonus points, can you do them with the HTTT verb? Index is a, yeah.
Edit is a get, update is a put.
Or a patch.
Is a get.
Used to be a post, yeah. Put or patch.
Is this like a rest?
That's rest, yeah. Correct, yeah. Great, you guys basically nailed that, yeah. So this is it here. This is just, the 7 RESTful routes are just like such a core fundamental idea. The idea behind CRUD, create, read, update, delete, is that you can take any kind of pattern you would see on the web and kind of express it in these 7 routes. It's pretty good. I don't want to talk too much about that though. So the other thing is, beyond those 7 routes, you also have the idea of member and collection routes, so or rather actions. So a member action is something that's run on a specific resource. So if you have a mate, you can promote them. You have to find, mate.find1 and then promote them. Whereas a collection action is something that would be more like an index, and it would just run on like a whole bunch of them. So after the routes.rb, the single most important file, I want to go to the second most important file in the application, which is ability.rb. So I still use can or can for my authorization. I'm not going to do the dance here. A lot of other people are using sorcery or pundit, or there's a whole bunch of them out there now. But ultimately, I like CanCan because it gives you the single ability.rb file, all your logics in like one spot, and it's been pretty good. Some people say in a really large enterprise app there might be performance implications of it, but on the apps I've written, I've never really run into that. So maybe one day. I would also argue that splitting them up, just here's my client, my staff, and my admin abilities. Just splitting those up and running just a small subset of the ability probably keeps it fairly fast. So then after the routes, that tells your app what you can do. The ability says which user can do which of these actions. We're going to run into the controllers. So this is how I write my controllers. That is to say that I don't write them. Controllers are super important pieces of code, but they are also very boilerplate. Every controller in the world is going to be 95% the same code, this code right here, with only little tweaks. So I've basically built a gem around this to try to completely remove controllers. So let's check out that gem now. That is a big one, the effective resources. So effective resources, if you've ever used like inherited resources or responders, this is basically a gem that brings like, it's like the glue of the effective gems. It brings everything together kind of thing. So effective resource basically looks at the routes.rb, looks at the ability.rb, it looks at the current user, and it figures out the context of the controller it's in. So here it's admin clients. And it basically just does the right thing. It serves the index, edit, update actions. It'll serve any of these member actions and stuff. And it just only gives the user links to those actions where they have permission to view them. It's very cool. So that's my time saver tip number 7, is don't write code at all. Right? Cool. Okay, so you've kind of seen the whole tour here. You've basically seen the app. And now I want to actually jump in and start building something. So I want to build a complete feature with you guys here in the next 10 minutes. First of all, though, is there any questions or anything? I know I'm going really fast. Please.
Are you using engines with any of these jobs?
All these are engines, yes. So a Rails engine is different than a gem, kinda, in that an engine serves views and can be considered like a little mini Rails application that you can host in your bigger application. So I kind of use the word gems, but that like effective pages that gives me my blog and stuff, that's a Rails engine. It's a little mini app that runs inside your big app. And the reason to build these is because you can just bring them to each different project you want and bring all your code with you. It's so handy.
Can I ask you
Please.
after or before? After you finish? I have a few questions.
Okay, let's save them to the end then. Yeah, I'm going to be just about 10 more minutes here yet. Cool. Okay, so we're going to go and build something. The standard example is to kind of like build a blog post or whatever, and I like that approach. That's basically where we're going here. But with programming, you know, everything is so black and white. We live and we're very depressive maybe. Everything's like do this or die, do this or exit. We got to execute the function. We got to do all those kind of negative words. So we're very dealing in death, and I like that. So I want to use the example of an autopsy. My web app here is now going to be for autopsier people that go and do an autopsy on a body here kind of thing. So we're going to basically first build a feature just to record some autopsy reports. So I'm going to start by thinking very hard about this autopsy file. But I always start with just building a standard Rails model. So to save you from having to watch me type this all in, this is what we got. So we got an autopsy, it's a standard application record. It's created by a user. There's some causes of death. So the name is just the name of the patient, how old they were when they died, the date of death, the cause of death, and just a description. Whenever I build a model, I always like to put these two scopes in. I always have a scope called deep, which basically includes all the extra has manys and belong tos and stuff in there. It gives me a good pattern to just kind of clean up my n+1 queries. I can just call .deep on any of my models, and it gives me all those includes. And then I always like to have a sorted scope as well. Rails 6 is actually doing this. They're introducing the idea of a default sorting column. But I don't have that yet, so I'm just doing a standard sorting scope on everything. And then we just got some validations and a 2S method. So that's it. That's my whole autopsy. That's the first thing I build. So then I jump back to the console, and I basically type in that guy right there. Just a second here. Boom. So that's it. That's my whole feature. I've gone and I've built out, let's check them out here. We have the autopsies. Maybe this created field shouldn't be in here. Effective Bootstrap, you get the client-side validation. So because this is a required field, it'll stop you right here. Spinner. So sure enough, we've created our first autopsy of Adam here. Show. Edit. Continue. So let's see what happened here. Scaffolds. We had a very quick discussion about this last month. Scaffolds are a way of doing code generation. Instead of me going out and typing out a whole bunch of files and all the boilerplate for this kind of stuff, built into Rails is a way of just saying, scaffold this. Give me a model name, and I'll do all the work for you, give you the starting point. So that's definitely time saver number 8. Use scaffolds. They'll save you so much time typing out boilerplate. So Rails has these ones built in already. You type Rails generate scaffold post, and you give it the attributes, and then it will go and build your migration, your model, all these test files, and all this stuff you get in. It's very handy. But it also doesn't match my process. I do things quite custom and all that. So I actually went and through the Gem Effective Developer, which is all my shell scripts and quality of life kind of stuff, we went out and built out a whole bunch of custom scaffolds. So you can type Rails generate scaffold autopsy, or you can type Rails generate effective scaffold autopsy. It does a bunch of different things. So with my effective scaffolding, it all starts from the model. I write and I go and I build that regular Rails model, and then everything else is read and implied from there. So the very first thing it does is it goes and it looks at the model, and then it uses that effective resources do block to grab the database columns, and it goes and it writes a migration. So sure enough, it wrote that out for me and automatically ran it. It created a controller. So that's my autopsies controller. It created a data table for me. So it automatically created that guy, which runs all my index views. And then it added it to ability.rb and the routes. Where are you, routes? Right there. Because we use those application templates, it didn't have to build any index or show or new pages, but it did throw in a partial that we render for just a singular object, singular autopsy, and then a form for creating the new ones. As well, this form is a little bit advanced because it actually went and it looked at the belongs to, figured out that it's not just renamed created by, it's actually users, and put in the proper collection there. It went and it found that we have the causes here as a constant, a pluralized constant that matches the singular name of the attribute. So it knows it's probably to use a select box, and then that kind of stuff. And this effective submit is basically just a f.save with a little bit of cool stuff in it. So that is basically the quick CRUD workflow kind of thing. But in my world, you know, CRUD's never enough. There's always one or two more requirements and all that kind of stuff. So the extra requirement we're going to get now is that some of these autopsy reports have gone out and the bosses aren't happy with them. There's been some bad language in them. Now they want to approve or decline all these reports before they get sent out. So we're going to build that out now. First, we want to go and create maybe like an admin area so we can view these autopsies in there. So again, we're going to scaffold here. And we're just doing a scaffold controller because the model already exists. But we can say, do it in the admin namespace, please. Great. So that's going to go and have made our admin autopsy stuff. And let's just hop in. So we're logged right in, but I'm going to sign out back to the admin area. So sure enough, we have our autopsies here. And let's go and add this, this approval process. Oh, wait, sorry. I wanted to point out that the admin autopsies, the form for it, actually calls the regular autopsies form. So this is intelligent use of partials. If you're going to be displaying the form on the front end and in the admin section, please don't write that form twice. You can only write it once and just refer to it. So that's what's done here. In the namespace, we have a form that renders the autopsies form autopsy with the namespace of admin. That's what's going on here. So that way I can use the same partial for both areas. And that's time saver tip number 10, use intelligent partials. Okay, we're in the home stretch here. I do want to add that approval process though. So how do we track that these autopsies are going to be approved? First thing, let's go and add a little a Boolean in there, if I could spell. And we're going to have to add that to the database. So this is, again, a Rails generator, scaffold thing, whatever you want to call it, for the migration. And because I've named it this way, because I've said to autopsies, which matches a data model, Rails is smart enough to figure it out and know that I'm actually adding an approved Boolean to the autopsies table. So it'll go and do this for me. I wish it would kind of automatically run the migrations sometimes, but other times you don't actually want that. I was playing around with like a live mode where basically every page refresh, it would read this effective resource block. And if you had typed in like a new attribute that wasn't on the database, it would go and it would build those and migrate for you. But in practice, I found it to be too annoying. I was like, not enough control, so whatever. Cool. Okay, so I added the Boolean into the database. We now have autopsies. I do that. We got to add it to our routes.rb. So we're going to go into the admin namespace, and we're going to add an extra action to approve it. So this is a member action because it's being run on one specific instance of the autopsy. And then we're going to have to, of course, tell the ability to RB that we can do this. So in the admin, we're going to say, I can approve an autopsy. Do you ever like say a word like 10 times or type it and then it like loses all meaning to you? This is called somatic satiation. And that's if you say the word 10 times fast, it like loses meaning. You're like, what am I even saying? Well, I get that all the time when I'm typing stuff. So autopsy is definitely doing that for me here. Can approve autopsy. Cool. So we can approve it if it hasn't been approved yet. And then we also want to just give him the ability to autopsy. And we got to fix a little bit up here. New. Create. Cool. So that way they can't edit other people's autopsies now that we're going to have to approve them. Approve. Cool. So we have added it to our routes. We've added it to our ability.rb. So when I refresh this page now, I should now see the approve action is in here. Or when I hop into my edit, sure enough, the approve is on there now too. So I'm going to click this. It's going to give me an error because my autopsy doesn't respond to approve method. So that's the last thing I got to do. I got to hop into here and just do one of those without the typo. Sure enough. So I added to the routes, the ability, the model. That's it. I didn't touch any controllers. I didn't touch any views. I didn't add anything to permitted parameters when I submit this form. That's all figured out through here. And it's basically the fastest way on the planet to add a action to your resource. Oh, what's going on here? Ability 77. I don't want to end on one of those. I think I just messed this up here. Okay, so sure enough, he's successfully approved. I'm also going to just add a scope to this for the funsies of it. Well, that's basically that. Approved. Did I add an unapproved one? Cool. Oh, I just added that to the not admin table. Sure enough. Cool. So basically, that's as far as I want to go. My time saver tip number 11 is basically write lots of metacode. If you're thinking about just one resource, that's great. But as you keep going and keep building more and more stuff on your app, if you can get each of those resources to kind of follow the same pattern, that's really the way to approach programming. So I don't know, in conclusion, Rails is awesome. If you're building CRUD apps, the effective gems are awesome, but everyone's different. So go out there, look at your own stack. What common patterns are you seeing in your projects? Try to extract those patterns, try to polish them. Don't repeat yourself, be effective. That's it, thank you. Give me some claps, yeah, thank you. Questions and comments, please. Sure.
If someone wants to start using one of your gems, which one would you recommend they start with?
Great question, yeah. Let's pull it up here. I would say hop into this. It depends what you want to do, but all the data table stuff is super polished. It gives you those really nice tables that you can sort, search, and all that kind of stuff on. There's also like charting and everything in there. It's pretty easy to get up and going, and it'll give you the most bang for your buck quickly. But beyond that, if you are using Twitter Bootstrap 4, check out Effective Bootstrap. It's amazing. And the logging is also really approachable, as you can just drop it into an app and you only have to do one or two little setup things. It mostly just works. So that's what I would say. If you want cool tables, effective data tables, if you're working with Twitter Bootstrap, check out that Bootstrap gem. And if you like really cool logs and automatic email logging and stuff, effective logging is the way to go. Please.
I have so many questions, but you can filter them.
Okay.
First one is this the effect website that you use. It's open source, right?
Yes. Yeah. Everything you've seen here today is open source. Yeah.
So can somebody clone that and use it?
Absolutely. Yep. To do that, you would want to go to Code and Effect Effective website. Click here for a live demo, check it out, or just run these 6 lines, and you'll be up and running.
What happens though if over time if someone uses it for commercial application?
That's okay.
And then what happens if you just shut down the repo and get
Oh, sure. Well, they would pull like a copy of that code, and they would have it on like their hard drives. Maybe they would use it to build out one of the client apps. And then if I shut down my repo effective website here, they would just have the code that they copied and nothing else. They wouldn't be able to get like updates, I guess. But basically nothing. Like they'd have a copy of it.
And the other question is, you said, okay, so the other question is you said also, no, also for, it's a good idea to have impression, right? So login as user.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, but if you are an admin,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know the user password, so how would you?
That's right. So that's exactly right. So as an admin, I'd be in my admin area here. I don't know any of these client passwords. I couldn't just go to the site and type in their email and password. I don't know it. But this gives me the ability to skip over that password part and just log in on their behalf, just like that.
Yes.
So as an admin user on the site, I can take over the account of any of my users. Yeah.
The last question is, I think the template you use for is Haml?
Yeah, Haml.
What's the difference between Haml and Slim?
Basically nothing. They're very similar. If you use Slim or Haml, it's basically the same. There used to be, Haml used to be very slow, and Slim was created, I believe, because they saw Haml and they're like, that's really cool, that we should make it fast.
Yeah.
So they did that. But then Haml, since then, is very performant as well now, and there's not too much difference between them.
So ARB is not a good idea?
It's a preference more than a good or a bad idea. I don't like ERB simply because I don't like opening tags and closing them, worrying about all the indentation side of things. I just find it faster to type like .card -body instead of this kind of thing.
You can use edit now,
Yeah.
which makes it basically the same.
Well, you do, and there's a lot of shortcuts, and I don't have them set up because I don't usually use ERB, but you can just like tab complete and stuff, and like it's not the worst, but I do feel that Haml or Slim removes like an entire area of problems around like closing brackets and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like one thing I just don't even need to think about. I like it.
So when you have error message on the browser,
Mhm.
if it is ARB, it's easy to detect the error message. Is it easy for Haml too?
Yeah, if I wanted to make an error, I could just be like, let's just do that, like a local variable type error thing. Sure enough, so it says, yeah, there's a undefined local variable ASDF on that line, and just like anywhere else, it tells you it's in the settings.html line 13 is the problem. Yeah. Cool. Please?
One question which is kind of more incidental, and then kind of another question. So the incidental one is, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Is effective logging impersonation aware?
Great question, yeah. No, it pulls the current user for way to do it. It will show that someone started and stopped an impersonation setting, or session, I should say. But yeah, if you sign in as some person and then you go and delete all their records, it's going to look like they deleted all their records, and the admin would have to like back up a little bit and be like, wait a minute. So that's maybe actually a good idea. That's something I should build out to have like the original users be the source of it. That's a good idea.
And then the second question is, sorry, I'm just framing it a bit.
Please.
What is your thinking about kind of moving towards mobile? So, like, have you played around with the idea on one hand of like effective API, and on
Sure.
the other hand, are you kind of thinking more like maybe the PWA direction?
I've explored a bit of PWA stuff. It wasn't mature enough when I looked at it a few years ago. But long story short, we just kind of aim for responsive websites that are going to look good in a browser, rather than doing like the whole actual mobile or going like a native or like one of those light wrappers around it. I want to show it off here just on the cell phone. We have like our SaaS product, Tidum, all about building high value meetings. And it was all just built out with the same technologies from the same starter website as this. Let me just log in here. But it basically just works with the Twitter Bootstrap 4 and just responsive and stuff. And I don't know, you don't need too much from it all. This is a terrible example. But yeah, so I guess my answer to that is you can build cell phone responsive apps and they just do fine. I don't really see, unless you need access to like cameras and sensors and like actually need to use the phone, you might as well just write a website. Cool. All right, I think that's everyone. I think that's a great talk. Thanks so much.